This week we make a base for this absolute monster. So I picked up this awesome Blood Angels Thunderhawk about a year back, and it's absolutely amazing to play with, but it's huge. It crashes into ruins, trees, everything. You can see the size of it on my painting desk here. So I need something to elevate it above the rest of the terrain. Enter the March of War Titan base. This thing is an absolute slab of resin and can more than easily support the weight of a Titan, or in this case, a Thunderhawk. It's got these nice grooves in it that allow for ruins to be placed in. Ruins that are helpfully included in the kit. They're called Gothic architecture, so they'll suit the Blood Angels nicely. This video isn't sponsored, but I do love March of War's stuff. James is a lovely guy and he runs a wonderful company. He's recently started a line of stowage for tanks, which I'm a mega fan of. Looking at the stuff here, he's got sandbags, pallets, little jerry cans and boxes, anything to make your tank look lived in. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. He's got anything you could possibly want in terms of bits. I use them all over my Sisters of Battle and Imperial Guard. If you're interested, the link will be in the description. Now let's move on to this big beastie. Absolutely enormous, made entirely of resin and very heavy. I was very nervous working with this guy. Just look at the scale. This is Rubio, who's leaping off a rock, and he's diddy tiny compared to it. I had to move the light to keep it all in shot. It's crazy big. Now, as this thing's a massive flyer, it needs some decent support. I obviously want it to be elevated because it is a flyer, but I wasn't sure what to choose initially. I eventually settled on this rather thick piece of wood here, about 18mm, 19mm, and it should be sturdy enough. I marked out the base with a marker so I knew where roughly I wanted to go, and then I decided to cut it down to size. I grabbed my hobby saw, braced it against the desk, and slowly made cuts through it. After that was done, I tidied up any of the splintered edges with my hobby knife, and it kept it nice and neat. I'd also recommend using a bit of sanding paper here too. I then drilled in a pilot hole into the bottom of the dowel where the screw is going to go into, because I'm going to screw through from the bottom of the base and make sure this thing's solid. I then put a hole into the resin base itself. Next up, the ultra scary part. I'm going to have to drill into the Thunderhawk to make sure that this dowel sits nicely inside it. Basically, I want the top of the dowel to touch the top of the Thunderhawk, and then there's no chance of it being knocked over, at least not without some considerable effort. So I drilled a pilot hole into the bottom of the Thunderhawk. It's not so bad. That was all right. Not too scary. Oh, that was a bit of a jump. Oh, yeah, it's fine. And then I had to get this thing, this massive cutter, and here we go. Just drilling into my Thunderhawk. Oh, it judders. It pops in. Whoa. Oh, there we go. Okay, I think we got it. Okay, no, not wide enough. I have to go back in again. This is the most terrifying thing I've done in my life. Oh, resin everywhere. But it's fine. Okay, nobody panic. It's fine. It's fine. Let's not do that again. Anyway, the dowel fits, so yep, good. Then I did the bit I was less afraid of and put a screw through the bottom of the base that I could then sight the dowel onto. I'm calling it a dowel, it's just a length of round wood. Not sure why I'm going with dowel here. I've built a lot of IKEA furniture lately and they have a lot of dowels, I guess. Using my drill, I then ensured that the screw was nice and tight and countersunk nicely into the resin. The resin is rather soft, which is nice, so the screw went straight through with no issue. Then I test fitted the Thunderhawk. As soon as I put it on, I realised the weight would hold, but it started to spin, so I needed something to secure it and ensure it doesn't spin constantly. Firstly, I wanted to reinforce the join at the bottom, so I used some hot glue just to give it that extra strength. So here's what the interior roof of the Thunderhawk looks like. There's a lot of uneven surfaces in there, which makes it very difficult for the dowel to sit flush. So I got this metal plate that came with a pack of magnets I bought and decided to slot this in at the top to make a flat surface. I used some brown stuff, which is exactly the same as green stuff, just I don't have any green stuff. There you go. I mixed this up together, put it on the bottom of the plate, and then doing some kind of interesting keyhole surgery, I put it into the Thunderhawk. The intent here was that the putty would mould to the roof of the Thunderhawk, allowing the plate to sit flush, meaning the dowel should have less chance of slipping. This whole process took a little while. Once it was in, I made sure it was ultra secure by basically drowning it in super glue. Then my amazing camera work strikes again as I countersunk a nice big magnet into the top of the dowel. This magnet should theoretically stick to the plate and help it stop spinning. Then it was time to put the buildings on the base. For this, as it's resin, I used super glue once again, in this case a fair amount, and then some super glue activator to make sure it dried instantly, because nobody's got time to wait for super glue. It's either dry or it isn't. Sometimes it dries instantly, sometimes it takes hours. It's just a mess. I don't really like working with super glue, but this activator makes it a bit easier. After that, I realised the buildings were a little bit harsh compared to the rest of the structure. They didn't really mesh nicely immediately, so I got some Mod Podge, which is essentially a bit like PVA glue, and then some ballast that I bought from Hobbycraft and sprinkled that about just to merge those two structures together and make it look like there's a bit of rubble. Once the ballast was down, I added some sand just to give it that real life difference that you get. No rocks are the same size all the time. Once that was done, I used some water to help the Mod Podge and everything tie together. Then I went round again with another squirt of Mod Podge, then another squirt of water, and it watered everything down and made sure none of the rocks could shift. There is a quicker way to do this, and that's just have pre-mixed PVA and water, and I will get round to it, I just didn't this time. Anyway, this is how the bases are supposed to look, a nice green with a water effect on the bottom. That's how my entire Blood Angels army is done, in some cases with fun splash effects, but I'm not going to do that here because the base is ginormous. For this, I fired up the airbrush and got some Cantor Blue from Citadel mixed with some thinner, sprayed it all over the areas that are going to be filled with water to give it a nice deep effect. I want this to look a little bit like some kind of half-submerged city. Once that was all done, I mixed up some Incubi Darkness into the cup of the airbrush and sprayed that all over the rocks for that nice green. Finally, I got some Panzer Grey from Vallejo, which is quite a dark primer, so I mixed it with some Silver Grey from AK Interactive to brighten it up. This will make an excellent base coat for the buildings. Once that was done, it was time to shade. I usually use Coelia Green shade for my Blood Angels bases, but this thing is massive and oil paints are cheaper, so I mixed my own approximation with some oil paints and slapped it all over. On big projects like this, or any base that's really over 50mm, you probably don't want to be using Games Workshop shades, because you're just going to spend a fortune on them. Once I'd given the oil paints ample time to dry, I then started dry brushing all the rocks. I worked my way through Carbolite Green, Cyberite Green, Gauss Blaster Green, and then a little bit of grey just to tie everything together. I gave the buildings a quick dry brush with some Dawnstone and then a Ministratum Grey. Once that was done, it was time for some water effects. I don't have any dedicated water effects because I ran out ages ago, so I used some Mod Podge which eventually dries clear. Unfortunately, by the time I put this video out, it still hadn't, so the base is going to have a few white bits lying about, but it does eventually dry clear. Then, because this base was so huge, I decided it needed something a little bit extra. I have a bunch of assault intercessors lying around thanks to Imperium magazine, and I thought, why not use some Vanguard veterans? And so I kit bashed 3 of them with some interesting weapons and some cool poses. Whilst I was building them, I stuck some pins into the bottom of the feet so I could use them both in games of 40k and as part of this mini diorama. I drilled some holes into the ruins so these guys could sit in, like this lovely Power Fist guy here, but equally they could be taken off and put into some resin bases as well. Hopefully it works, it seems fairly neat, and it's nice to have dual purpose models. I painted these guys in under 2 hours for all 3. If you want to learn how to speed paint Space Marines, you're just going to have to check out the next video. Until then, I'm Sam. See you in a bit!